Now I'd like to introduce Mike Phillips, he is one of the gentlemen who have been keeping his pulse on the biodiversity conversation, and Mike comes to us from the Turner Endangered Species Foundation. I'm really looking forward to your presentation. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm going to dive right in because 15 minutes is not a lot of time. I caught my first gray wolf 34 years ago. Not long after that, that's not supposed to be the first slide. That is, there you go, okay. Not long after that, I had the good fortune to lead the effort to restore red wolves to the southeastern United States. This little female known as 344 was the first red wolf born in the wild in many decades. After that, I had the good fortune to lead the effort to restore gray wolves to Yellowstone National Park. After that, I had the good fortune to saddle up with Ted Turner and his family to launch what has become the largest private effort in the world to redress the extinction crisis. I wish I could say that, well, I've been involved with the extinction crisis since 1980. I wish I could say that I didn't have much to say today because the work was done. But that's not the case, unfortunately. Have you ever heard of Whipple's monkey flower, Las Vegas dates, silver trout, sugar spoon, narrow cat's paw, Tennessee riffle shell, fig seed diving beetle, easy yellow-faced bee, true pigtoe? All of those are species that have gone extinct in the recent past in the United States. Have you ever heard of Martha? That's Martha. Martha was a passenger pigeon who died at the Cincinnati Zoo at 1 p.m. on September 1st, 1914 at the ripe old age of 29. Martha was not an extraordinary passenger pigeon. She just happened to be the last. Passenger pigeons were fanatically gregarious creatures. Evolution had committed them to a strategy of exaggerated togetherness. Consequently, they were very easy to kill. The decline happened fast. In the early part of the 1880s, big flocks, including millions of birds, were known. Before the end of that decade, groups of 200 were noteworthy. The last wild bird was shot by a 14-year-old boy outside Sargent's, Ohio on March 24, 1900. After that, the species was only known in captivity, and Martha was the last of that crowd. Upon her death, Martha's small body was frozen in a block of ice and shipped to the Smithsonian. Ironic, isn't it? Billions of passenger pigeons had been killed with no attention to their biology or their anatomy or their ecology, but upon her death, Martha's little body was seen as precious, in accord with the scarcity theory of value. Like other extinction crises, the one that we're currently involved in operates across a massive scale. Every year, thousands of species and attendant ecological interactions fine-tuned by time and place disappear at the hand of man. Losses are so severe that the redundancy and certainty of nature is being stripped away, exhausting the lives of millions. Without doubt, the current extinction crisis is one of humanity's most pressing problems, and on par with the 5 great waves of extinction that have swept across this planet since multicellular life first arose 1 billion years ago. The first extinction crisis occurred in the Ordovician era about 440 million years ago. That event emptied the oceans. The 5th crisis occurred during the Cretaceous era about 66 million years ago. During that crisis, dinosaurs disappeared in a geologic instant as an asteroid measuring about 6 miles across slammed into the Earth, traveling at 45,000 miles per hour. The 6th great extinction crisis began in the latter part of the 18th century, at the onset of the Anthropocene, the age of man. Like all of these waves of extinction, ours is characterized, if you want to define an extinction crisis, it's characterized by untold numbers of species disappearing around the world. These aren't isolated events, at a rate that greatly exceeds the normal geological rhythms of life and death. During an extinction crisis, all bets are off. The normal Darwinian-based rules of survival of the fittest, those rules become irrelevant. The changes brought about by these waves of destruction are so fast and so complete that the very notion of Darwinian fitness is rendered moot. Species that survive, this is important, species that survive an extinction crisis are not so adapted as simply lucky. Think about the power of a destructive force that's so overwhelming that survival of the fittest, that tried and true approach for life marching inexorably in the direction of persistence, is rendered totally irrelevant. Imagine a force is so powerful that the whole of living nature with the wisdom of the ages has insufficient time, resources, and know-how to adapt. What then are we to make of the sixth great crisis before us? Well, it's most important to note that it's not a speeding asteroid, but rather it is us marching inexorably in this direction in a most powerful way to do one thing: domesticate the planet. That's what's driving this crisis as we speak today. What does this have to do with renewable energy? Well, I think the extinction crisis, above all else, is a clarion call for changing our relationship with one another and the planet Earth. Why is this so? Why is the extinction crisis the clarion call? Because it's loud and it's clear, as all clarion calls must be. It's certainly a loud problem. For those who are willing to listen, it's almost deafening. I can imagine that with each passing, there's a celestial bell that rings endlessly in the heavens, marking the passage of yet another miracle. And it's certainly clear. It provides clear evidence, unequivocal evidence that something is amiss. But be mindful, over the long sweep, a billion years of multicellular life, there have been 5 events that rival the extinction crisis that we're in today. If that's not evidence that something is amiss, then I don't know what amiss means. We understand the cause of the extinction crisis. It's human-induced habitat degradation, habitat loss, habitat modification, invasive species overexploitation, and over the last few decades, climate change. So you wonder, what does this have to do with energy and energy policy and renewable energy? Well, if we can mainstream renewables as a way for redressing the climate change problem, it will double as a redress for the extinction crisis as well. The transition that we should consider should align us with the great thoughts of the eco-theologian Thomas Berry, who imagined a transition from a period of human devastation of the earth to a period when humans would relate in a more beneficial manner. We need a transition to a heavy reliance on renewables, a transition to a restorative economy, where all of the costs of production, distribution, and consumption are accounted for today. We need a transition to fairness within and between generations, a transition to peace amongst ourselves and all other creatures, great and small. The growing momentum of the extinction crisis makes clear we're running out of time. Soon we won't have anything to transition to. Without immediate and substantive and systemic changes, we are not going to have a world that we're proud to give to our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. A step in the direction of necessary change would be to redouble our support for the Federal Endangered Species Act. This would be a direct way to respond to the extinction crisis. Increasingly, it seems that the Endangered Species Act is incapable of doing any more than simply buying us a bit of time before the permanent losses are registered. What do you do on behalf of the Endangered Species Act? Well, first I would suggest that you thank your lucky stars that you live in a country where votes matter. Then I would ask that you redouble your involvement in electoral politics, so we elect officials who are willing to work to remedy the extinction crisis. remedy environmental degradation in general, remedy misguided fossil fuel energy policies that increasingly favor a few at the cost of many. The degraded condition of our biosphere screams out that we redouble our efforts in all aspects of politics and policy. We must be part of a movement that puts a stop to politicians' flagrant disregard for science on matters of great importance like biodiversity conservation, energy policy, and human welfare in general. Now, I know, and you probably do too, that we're imagining a massive mission to effect this great transition. Massive missions always require a mastery of politics. There is simply no other way to marshal the requisite resources. We could more fully master politics. We could more fully ensure a certain transition if more of us showed up to serve in elected office. Now, you may agree that the world is run by those who show up, but you're not the least bit inclined to show up to serve in the irrational world of politics. Well, you know, I found that politics is not all that irrational. I've served in the Montana legislature for a decade. I currently sit in the Montana Senate. It's not an irrational world. It's a world defined by a bunch of knuckleheads, but they're not irrational. More importantly, I've come to believe that at its core, our political system favors folks like us. It favors people that believe that facts and knowledge and scholarship and determination matter. Why do I believe this in this age of hyperpartisanship? Because of the way in which our country was founded. During the formative years from 1786 to 1788, the founders recognized that there was no way on the heels of the hard-fought Revolutionary War to establish a republic that resolved the problems related to the rights of the federal government versus the rights of state governments. There was no way to resolve the problems related to the rights of women, the rights of Native Americans, the rights of slaves. At the time of our nation's founding, those problems were insolvable. So our founders created a political system and political parties as institutionalized channels for ongoing debate, which permitted dissent to be regarded not as a treasonable act, but as a legitimate voice in an endless argument. The enduring genius of the Constitution is that it provides a framework for debating salient questions endlessly if need be. We will not succeed in ending the extinction crisis. We will not succeed in making renewable energy a foundation of a new energy future. We will not succeed in any efforts to make the world a more peaceful, prosperous, or just place for all creatures great and small unless we more fully master politics by winning more debates, by winning more elections. In 1990, following 27 years of imprisonment, Nelson Mandela spoke 11 words that ended apartheid. He said, "We can't win a war, but we can win an election." In 1994, he became South Africa's first black president, and with that ended the policy of apartheid. Similarly, we can win more elections. And by winning enough elections, we can ensure the conservation of the wondrous diversity of life on Earth. And that is, of course, a critically important part of the great transition before us. Thank you very much.